Senator Blumenthal. Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. Generals, thank you for your service. Ms. Justin, what crimes did Mr. Khan plead guilty to?
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Khan pled guilty to several law of war crimes, including murder, spying, conspiracy.
Mr. Stimson, Mr. Jaffer. Mr. Jaffer, I was the person in the Senate Armed Services Committee that asked General Milley and General McKenzie if the war on terror was over, and they both gave a categorical no as an answer. It was either in that hearing or a subsequent hearing that we also assessed that with the precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan, that the United States is likely to suffer an attack from ISIS-K over the next 6 to 12 months, either on the homeland or against U.S. assets worldwide, and al-Qaeda probably following behind them between 1 to 2 years. So there's a real serious threat to future detainees, and I happen to agree with Senator Graham. Now there's a great incentive to simply kill them on the battlefield and not detain them, and that seems like a perverse incentive. Mr. Stimson, I think you mentioned when you were in the Bush administration, you were tasked with looking at the possible closure, responsible closure of Guantanamo Bay. What was the ultimate conclusion there?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator Tillis. The hearing, the study is classified, but I categorized it in an unclassed format in my written testimony, and it fell into 4 categories. Number one, it can be done. And if the 4 categories are legal, logistical, political, and diplomatic, each of the 4 you have to work on simultaneously. The logistical is the easiest part. Now with 39 people, 1 plane load would do it if you were to take them together to one place. The legal part, you've heard several of my colleagues talk about some of the conundrums there and the difficult aspects, especially if you brought them to the United States. Many of those answers haven't been put forth in OLC or other opinions. Political's tough. And that has been the long pole in the tent, as far as I'm concerned, because I think the table was set back in the Obama administration to get it done. People were for closing it until they were against it, when it turned out that some of the...
Isn't it also true the table is more or less set the same way right now? The president has the authority to do it, and there's no way that those of us who would oppose closing it could stop it here in Congress?
Well, as I detailed in my written testimony, Senator, things have changed somewhat because since 2009, this body and the other body across the Hill have put forth into law certain notification and other requirements before you transfer somebody off of the island, their spending limitations, et cetera. And so those would have to be adhered to before it was closed. But yes, it's always been the prerogative of the president, whether it's President Bush or any president, to close Guantanamo in a responsible way, but Congress plays an important part in that and would have to join in on that.
I'm wondering, when we're talking about a responsible transfer to another jurisdiction, we're not being particularly successful with doing that. So isn't that a kind of a global acknowledgement? I know on the one hand we say we're suffering reputational damage for having Gitmo open, but the fact that we can't find other jurisdictions to responsibly relocate them almost seems like a de facto approval of this is the worst option, except for all the other options that we've tried to pursue. Am I wrong about that, Mr. Jaffer?
Well, Senator, I think you're right in the sense that we can't get the right security assurances. There are a third of the detainees currently at Guantanamo Bay are designated for transfer, but we can't get countries to take them and give us assurances that they'll keep an eye on them and make sure they don't return to the fight. And given that we know that 30% roughly have either returned to or suspected of returning to the fight,
five are actually in the Taliban administration.
Exactly right. And one point on that, those detainees who are in the Taliban administration were actually transferred in violation, GAO found, of the congressional prohibition on transfer notification under the Obama administration. They were transferred in violation of the law. And then the one last thing I'd say, Senator, to your question is, we've talked a lot about the reputational effects of Gitmo, and there's no question that there have been significant reputational effects. But other things have also had significant reputational effects. The way we've handled our withdrawal from Afghanistan, the abandoning of our Afghan allies who fought alongside us, right? Those have had massive reputational effects. today in that ongoing ungoverned space, in that battlefield. And you can be assured that our terrorist adversaries are using those facts against us today also in their recruitment efforts.
Thank you all.
Senator, could I add something to my answer that you asked me about
Yes, Ms.
earlier? You
Jessup.
asked me what Mr. Khan pled to, and while he pled to very serious crimes, I just think it's important to note that he took responsibility for his actions, and he's been cooperating with the United States of America for over a decade and has done everything they've asked in assistance of investigations and prosecutions of folks who have been charged with terrorism.
I think that's a fair point in representing your client, but the fact of the matter is he's responsible for murder and pled to those crimes. So we're not talking about potentially innocent people of the 39 down there. We're talking about people who have done grave damage to human life, engaged in the battlefield, and we can't forget that that's the nature of the people that are down there and why we have to be very careful. And if Guantanamo Bay is closed, it has to be done in a responsible way. There's 4 administrations that haven't figured it out yet.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. Senator Hirono.